Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Friday DMZ, end of week DMZ, which is screwing up our usual DM Zoom plans.
It's been a rough week for both of us.
This is spring break for my kids, so that's definitely throwing my schedule off kilter. I don't know what.
And I had the vaccine. That messed me up a little bit. Not in terms of health, in terms of my scheduling. So here we are.
Now, how is West Virginia on vaccines at this point?
I don't know where we were. Last time I saw, we were no longer in the top 10. But I think West Virginia is doing pretty well.
So I just saw.
I can tell you,
I saw a Biden official said that there are 8 states with more than 60% of adults with the first shot, and West Virginia is not on that list. It is dominated by New England.
Yeah, no, I think sadly, my guess is that supply is starting to outpace demand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I can tell you that my experience with the second shot was good. It was a different location this time. They changed the date on me. That's part of what screwed up our DM Zoom this week and our taping. And it was at the it's hilarious, man. I tweeted and Instagrammed and Facebooked. It was so good. I went the full Bennett, or what's it called when you do all the Sunday morning shows?
Full Ginsburg.
Full Ginsburg. Anyway, I went on all the social media platforms because it was hilarious. Literally, when I was going to get my vaccine, there was a sign that said, like, casino traffic, keep left, vaccine traffic, go right, which led to all sorts of one-liners and quips. But I didn't even have to get out of my car this time. They did it at the parking garage of a casino. And it was pretty efficient.
Do you get a couple chips? Do you get to do a round of blackjack or do some roulette?
They really should have combined those things. I mean, it would have been great. Sadly, no.
So I'm looking at the New York Times tabulation of vaccinations, or at least I'm trying to. It's being hinky. I think this is not as up to date as what Biden's guy just tweeted, because they had New Hampshire at 70% one shot. This still has New Hampshire at 59. I don't know. It's being slow. If it ever loads properly, I will tell you where West Virginia stands.
My guess is we're right around the middle of the pack now. We got off to a good start, but I think we're probably around the middle of the pack.
I mean, if you're in a lightly populated state, I think, it doesn't take a lot of numbers to get a good start out of the box. But these rural populations, or the populations, seem to be more Trumpy, more vaccine skeptical. And I just kind of think that if I'm a Republican, I got to worry about my vote dying off at a faster pace as blue state Democrats will, because of this disparity. I would think there'd be a whole lot more begging of Donald Trump. Hey, Trump, can you do some PSAs? Can you do something so our voters don't die on us?
It seems like the mortality rate is down, at least just anecdotally it feels that way. But I can tell you, Bill, from personal experience, I've talked to people and I'm like, have you gotten your vaccine yet? And they say, no. And they don't really, and then a couple of days later they have COVID. And I've been around other places where they're not doing the mask thing the way that I would like it. They're not social distancing. And then they come down with COVID. So, maybe we'll get to herd immunity one way or the other. But I don't know why they're choosing to do it. It's like you can do it hard or you can do it easy. You know what I mean? Wouldn't you? Okay, even if you're a Trumpy person, and even if you think masks are overblown and this whole thing is overwrought, if you had the choice between getting a shot or possibly getting even just say the flu, wouldn't you do the shot? Mm-hmm. I know I would.
I mean, the flu shot, I checked this, flu shot vaccination rate for adults in the 2019-2020 season was 48.4%, which is not that great. Now, granted, there isn't the same amount of hyper-awareness, there isn't the same kind of panic around it, but people do die from the flu.
Not this year. Very few people are getting the flu this year.
Right. Yes. I mean, if we were social distance all the time, those numbers would also go down. So, by the way, West Virginia, according to the New York Times list, is at 35% adults with one shot. Actually, this might not be adults. This might be all people, which might be why the numbers are lower than what the Biden bill just tweeted out, because the Biden numbers, I think, were adult percentages. You bring the kids into the pool, you're going to bring that number down.
But that would theoretically hurt states that have a lot of kids, right?
Yeah.
West Virginia, I'm guessing, does not have a lot of kids.
I don't know how that all shakes out. I mean, you probably let the people who move away when they get to be 18, but you still have kids.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think I'm guessing West Virginia is an older population than.
So this is West Virginia with all people at 35%, whereas my state of Massachusetts 51, top one being New Hampshire 59. And, the very bottom is Mississippi with 30. So West Virginia is, pretty low down on that list.
This reminds me of that old Saturday Night Live skit where Bill Clinton's like, we just shot past, Arkansas just shot past Mississippi and, worst college performance or whatever it was. Watch out, Alabama.
So I think, but your point is there's less mortality now than at the front end because we do know how to treat it better. But you're still going to have some. And maybe look, if you have worse mortality rate in West Virginia or Mississippi or in Alabama, these aren't swing states, so maybe it's not that big of a deal politically speaking. Obviously, I'm not trying to be glib about any individual dying. But from a political standpoint, how much should Republicans care? How much should Trumpers care? I don't think you get to, I'd say maybe the lowest swing state or swing-ish state on this list. Well, Georgia 33%. And Texas 36%. These are states where, races have been close. And you lose a handful of white rural conservative voters, that maybe that could make a difference in some races.
Even without COVID, this is a problem that Republicans could have if they double down on, older white Americans.
I mean, they're already in a demographic vice because their people are going to die off before the Democratic, younger, more diverse populations move into these states. So it just strikes me as not advantageous to allow this kind of vaccine skepticism to persist. And they could do something about it. Trump could do something about it, and he's not. Yeah.
No, the sense I get out here is that it's not that big of a deal. That all y'all that are so concerned about it, it's you're up in arms about nothing. And then I see the same people who basically are demonstrating that attitude, getting it. And
so when you get it, this is what I find strange. So Ted Nugent just got it.
Yeah.
And he said, boy, it was horrible. I mean, this is a guy who's been a huge hoaxer, vaccine skeptic and all that. Said it was truly terrible. He was literally crawling on the floor 10 days, but still isn't going to get the vaccine now. I mean, so when you come across people who have gotten it or know people who have gotten it, does it change any kind of perception? Boy, I wasn't so sure of this before, but man, I got it. That was brutal. Or people like, yeah, I got it. It sucked, but I got over it. And, now I guess I'm immune, so I'll move on with my day, even though you may not be all that immune. Does it change anything?
Well, so first of all, literally some of the examples I'm giving are happening right now. Mm-hmm. So they have not come out the other end yet.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, I don't have I think to probe into that requires a certain intimacy and a level of friendship that's pretty close. Hey man, level with me. And so I don't really have that kind of relationship anyway. I can just tell you, like, again, anecdotally, my sense is that they no one comes out and says, man, I was an idiot. I should have gotten the vaccine. What was I thinking? Like, that just doesn't happen, at least I haven't seen it.
So, I mean, I'm not, an epidemiologist or public health expert, so don't take my word for anything on this subject. But my guess is that we're not going to get to herd immunity through vaccinations. I mean, maybe where I am, maybe New England, we might get there, but I don't know if how insulated we are from the rest of the country. And so, if you don't get to herd immunity, and you don't get there fast enough to dampen the spread of these variants, do we end up in a situation like with the flu, where there are flu variants every year, and you have to get a flu shot every year if you want to protect yourself? And the flu shots aren't perfect. It doesn't mean you don't get the flu, but at least if you do get it, you might mitigate it, depending on how good the vaccine is that year. I just wonder if that's where we are going to be with COVID-19, that we're always going to have to get a booster to stay on top of it.
I am also not a doctor or scientist, but that seems like a plausible scenario to me.
And then we continue to have these debates over whether this is real or not.
Yeah. And by the way, idiot Ron Johnson. Have you seen the latest?
I caught a headline, didn't catch the whole story.
Something to the effect of he's saying, like, if you get the vaccine, why do you care if your neighbor has it? You're protected. Why, only the people who really want it or really, need it should get it. And of course, as part of the reason for getting reaching herd immunity, aside from preventing the variants, would be protecting people who cannot get vaccinated. And right now that would be anybody under the age of 16, but it would be someone who has a compromised immune system, or like a pregnant woman or something. They can't maybe get a vaccine. And if we have herd immunity, you're protecting them. And so in that case, you do care if your neighbor doesn't have it, right, out of compassion. So anyway, I think it just underscores both the ignorance as well as the lack of compassion and the lack of community, that a certain strain of the right has right now.
Well, if I could also be soulless and horrible again, Wisconsin is a very close swing state and very culturally polarized. I don't think you want to lose any of your white rural voters if you're Ron Johnson and you're thinking about re-election. It just strikes me as really short-sighted to be being this dismissive about it when you need your people healthy.
Yeah, this thing is serious, and I don't know why people wouldn't just get vaccinated.
Maybe Matt Lewis needs to do some PSAs.
I think the kind of people who would be persuaded by Matt Lewis are already getting vaccinated. That's kind of part of the problem, right?
I mean, I think there are certain religious leaders who are trying to, quote scripture to encourage people to get vaccinated, because I think white evangelicals white evangelicals, white rural conservatives, there's a lot of overlap in these populations. That's the biggest problem right now. And I think I heard someone on TV trying to, lean on love thy neighbor to make the point that you were making. It's not going to be because Biden does the PSAs. I've read that the government strategy is we know we can't have it be a heavy-handed government message, because that's not going to work with the people we need to reach. Yeah. We need to find the doctors in the rural communities who have the relationships with their own clients to say, hey, trust me, I'm your country doctor. This is real, and this is not going to hurt you. That's the only way that you're going to get over. I doubt it's going to be perfect, but if you're going to squeeze out as much as you can and maximize these numbers, it's those kinds of local ties that are going to do it.
Yeah. I will say, and this is like, almost a cliche at this point, this is not an original thought and it'll be seen as a cheap shot, but I do believe that I think we should have been selling the vaccinations more, like in terms of the sex appeal of them. Like, get vaccinated so you can quit wearing the mask, so you can go on vacation, so you can, like, maybe it's, Biden said you can have a barbecue in your own backyard on the 4th of July if you're lucky. I mean, again, I know I don't want to be the guy who just beats up on Joe Biden, which is a tough place to be because compared to Donald Trump, it's like Mike Murphy told me on my podcast. He's like, if you spent the last 4 years living with Charles Manson, Pretty Boy Floyd seems like a pretty good roommate,
I mean, I think the problem with that message is if you're already dismissive, if you're already having the barbecues, if you're already seeing your grandkids, if you're already traipsing around without your mask wherever you feel like, telling you now you can do these things doesn't land because you're already doing them.
Okay, but the other option is get the vaccine and nothing changes. You still have to keep wearing masks. You still can't travel. I mean, there should be a peace of mind maybe that comes from it. They could sell. There's something that they could be selling, like sell the sizzle, not the steak, right? There's something sexy they could be selling, and instead it's like, do it because it's your responsibility and you still can't have fun.
I mean, if I was doing the advertising, I would, there's always a risk that you get so alarmist that people tune you out and think you're not being credible. Like you just said, the mortality is down. Perhaps the biggest risk probability-wise not dying, but just being really sick. And not even just like
definitely a bigger risk.
And not even just like the 5-10 days of being sick, but whatever lingering after effects you have, whatever long COVID you might get. So, I mean, if you had a Ted Nugent, not that Ted Nugent would do this, obviously, but like if you could get a Ted Nugent saying, man, I thought it was no big deal, but trust me, it's a big deal. I'm still alive, but it was a brutal 10 days, and I still have the cough, and I still don't feel 100%. I don't know when it's going to go away. Trust me, you don't want what I have. Do yourself a favor and get the vaccine. I feel like that
would be good.
That to me would be the most powerful thing you could do.
That would be good. And can we do a cat scratch fever somehow? I don't know what the analogy would be. But yeah, someone who was like a testimonial, like I was like you, I guess, but Herman Cain dying didn't really make much of a difference. So
yeah, I mean, the dying thing, like people have been pretty fatalistic about, we're all going to die someday. I'm not going to change what I do with my life because I'm going to die. I think you might suffer for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Might be a more powerful message than you're going to die.
It may be. And I don't, like I said, like if you just said to me, there's like a 50% chance that you're going to like get the flu, just the flu, or you can go take this shot. Sign me up for the shot. I mean, number one, I don't want to feel bad. Number two, I got stuff to do. I got podcasts to tape. I got columns to write.
Speaking of, Matt, so I had a column last week about infrastructure and saying that Democrats don't necessarily have to take a Republican counteroffer right away, but they should take the offer seriously and engage in negotiations. And when I wrote that, a good number of people said to me, these guys don't even have their act together. You don't know if there's going to be a counteroffer. So they're not going to get anywhere near where Biden is proposing anyway. Now, we do have a counteroffer. It's not near where Biden is, but it is a counteroffer. It's at $568 billion. It's more tightly focused on traditional physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, utilities, I think mini broadband. There might be a few other things in there, but that's sort of the gist of it. And so the question now is, what does Biden do with this? He's been having some meetings with Republicans anyway, but does this become the basis of a formal negotiation? I'm at 2.3. you're at 568 billion. Let's now trade ideas and see if we can meet in the middle somewhere. Or does this make Biden and the Democrats say, this is not serious, this is a quarter of what we're at, this isn't coming anywhere close to the scope of the problem, it's time for us to get our ducks lined up, get the 50 Democrats, and do this through reconciliation. If taking a step back, Matt, not being a Republican, just being a commentator, an observer, a strategist, what would you do if you were in Biden's shoes?
He's at a crossroads, right? There's two different strategies. One strategy says, points on the board, run up the score, do it to them, they do it to you. You're going to be remembered by what, big legislation. The more money you spend, the better in that regard, because you're more action is what matters. Points on the board is what matters. That has been what's been driving politics for a long time. And so that's obviously the strategy that Biden has chosen. And so that's what he's going to do. He's going to do it via reconciliation, and he's not going to cooperate with Republicans. I think you could argue, just again, strictly strategically, you could argue that doing something bipartisan would be better for the country and for Biden, and it makes it more likely, like if something goes wrong, like if a Democrat gets hit by a bus in a week, then you would have established a bipartisan pathway that is not contingent on a simple majority and doing everything via reconciliation. So those are the strategic choices. I think you can make an argument for both. I think it's very clear that Joe Biden is going to run up the score and go it alone.
Well, I don't know if Biden can. Well, finish up.
Well, let me put on my sort of conservative hat and say $500 billion is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, do you remember we had a huge fight over like Medicare Part D? That was like $400 billion or something, right?
Right.
Okay. So this bill, the Biden plan, has like $400 billion for long-term care, like something that's legit, but not infrastructure. And calling it infrastructure, I think, is intellectually dishonest. I mean, it requires a lot of creativity and twisting of anything could be infrastructure once we start going down that path. Take the $500 billion. That's a lot of money. And if you can, okay, Republicans, I dare you now. You said you're for it. Let's pass this. That I think would be better for the country. They won't do it.
Well, I think, Biden would probably go reconciliation if he can. Especially now, we should talk more about the climate stuff, after this. He just put forth a very big, aggressive climate pledge that will be very hard to meet without passing legislation. And I think they're hanging a lot of hopes in the climate portions of their infrastructure proposal to get there. So if Biden had 50 Democrats to do things that way, I would imagine he would follow the same logic he did with the rescue plan. I don't think he has 50 votes today. Joe Manchin has just said this week that we should work with Republicans and said, forgive me if I'm not quoting it exactly, it's not going to be $2.3 trillion. There are a lot of people telling me, oh, Manchin's not going to dilly-dally with Republicans. He wants $4 trillion. Did you hear what he said? He wants $4 trillion. And you got to go back and look at exactly what he said before. He said at one point, I would do 2, 3, 4 trillion. And at another point he said, I would do 4 trillion if it is paid for. He never said, I'm for 4 trillion or bust. He's always had wiggle room. And now his latest comment is essentially, I am willing to do less than $2.3 trillion to get Republicans on board. So it's hard to take any one Manchin statement to the bank because it can be very cryptic and paradoxical. But you at least have to, if you're Biden, if maybe Biden has a phone call with Joe Manchin and says, hey, Joe, what do you really mean here? What really is your bottom line? If he knows what that is.
That's kind of the model from the rescue package, right? Like Manchin and Sinema basically put the kibosh on the $15 minimum wage and ended up going along with a lot of the spending otherwise. And I mean, maybe it's wrong of me to extrapolate and assume that they're going to repeat that pattern, but like I could see Manchin getting something in a negotiation, and then the price might come down a little bit, and then going for it. So maybe it's just $2 trillion.
To take the entirety of what Manchin has said at his word, what he would insist upon is you go to committee. You have a markup. You give the opportunity for Republicans to have amendments in that markup. You see what bill is produced from that process. You take it. This is where we're a little fuzzy. I think he said at least that much. Where I'm not 100% sure about is would he insist that you then take that bill to the floor and give Republicans the chance to amend on the floor and then see if that bill can pass. If you can't pass that bill, if that bill gets filibustered, then Manchin would say, okay, let's do reconciliation. I think that's what Manchin is going to insist upon. So I think that it makes it incumbent on Biden to see how much he can get through that process. And look, if you can only get 568, or maybe you can jack it up to 600, 700, 800, or what have you. So you try to get the number up as best you can. But you're not going to get 2.3 trillion out of that. You can then say after that, okay, this is what we can get with Republicans. And if American people, you want more, I'll try through reconciliation. My guess is Republicans will say to Joe Manchin, we're not doing this if you're going to screw some reconciliation. We're not doing the two-step. So I need your word that you're not going to let them do that. And I think Manchin would accede to that. That's my personal read on Manchin. Obviously can't be a total mind reader. Let's say that is the case. That what you get out of a bipartisan deal is the end of it. You can't get more. Democrats can at least say, if you want more, if you think, I couldn't get long-term care in this deal, but if you want that, vote for more senators in 2022. Vote for more House members who are Democrat in 2022. We still want to do more for you. Give us the numbers in Congress to let us do that for you. Give yourself a campaign issue. I mean, it's not being crassly political because you're still delivering. Hey, I got you checks.
Yeah.
I got you vaccines. I got you a good amount of infrastructure. I didn't take no for an answer. I'm trying to make government work for everybody here and keep us united as a country. But if you want more, I want more. Give me the people in Congress so I can get you more.
And it's also just more honest, like if you think it's a good idea that we, you can make an argument like we have a long-term care is creating a crisis for a lot of families. Is we get more baby boomers, retire and get old, and it's important. Like, let's have that debate, let's have that argument, let's have that vote. But it's a lot of money, and it's not infrastructure.
I mean, I think Republicans. The political, there are political cross pressures here. I mean, long-term care is something that affects a lot of people, regardless of political persuasion. It's not a blue state, red state thing. It's not a white-black thing. Lots of people have to deal with care of their elderly parents.
It's also like not a rich poor thing. I mean, you could be pretty affluent, and if your mom all of a sudden has to go, either you have to hire someone to help provide care at home, or you're going to put, her in
nursing
some
home,
sort of facility. I mean, like that, we're talking about a lot of money.
Oh, you can go from upper middle class to lower middle class pretty readily if you don't plan this stuff out properly.
And it's almost like catastrophic. I mean, it could bankrupt a person who's otherwise pretty well off.
Right. So I don't think Republicans are in a great place to say, hey, I'd love to help you with this, but it's technically not infrastructure, so I'm not. Like, that's not a great argument for somebody who wants the help. Now, I do think there is always a strain in the electorate that gets nervous about excessive spending. And Democrats might not believe that to be true because we've spent so much in the past year without there being political repercussions. But that was in the midst of genuine immediate crisis. You know, there is a threshold. There is a point where some people say, I'm worried this is too much. I'm worried this is going to lead to me paying more in taxes or inflation getting out of hand and my dollar not going as far. So, yeah, I would love to do this, and I'm worried about it for my own family, but, you know, we can only do so much here. That's an argument I think Democrats have to be more concerned about. Yeah. I think Republicans are not in an awesome place talking about the semantic definition of what infrastructure is.
I think we're also getting to a point, and this is really dangerous for the Republic, but I think we're getting to a place where a lot of middle-class people are like, hey, we're going to get screwed anyway. Let's get a piece of the action. Mm-hmm. Like, if this thing's going down anyway, and we're going to have to, you know, pay huge taxes, or our grandkids are going to pay taxes, at least Biden's giving us something. It used to always be just poor people who got it. But like, we're going to get a piece of the action now. And so we are now stakeholders in it. And so in a way, we can be co-opted or bought off a little bit. It's a bad thing for a country, I would say, but good for Joe Biden.
What's with infrastructure? I mean, Democrats are very excited that infrastructure is sort of a tangible good. You can deliver it. You can see it in your community. People will be thankful for it. And I think that really forgets what happened with the Recovery Act in 2009. I mean, there was some infrastructure done in that. It didn't happen right away. It didn't happen for everybody. Northampton got a Amtrak train station that they did not have before from the Recovery Act. And look, I'm in a very liberal area. People actually like the train station. We actually have very high, or we did before the pandemic, had high rider use relative to the rest of the Amtrak system. And so there's no negative backlash to it here. But this is a fairly unique circumstance. And but this is a place where even if you are not using it regularly, you're a liberal and you like government spending, so you like that it's there. You like the symbol of it being there. There are plenty of people for whom you get that piece of infrastructure in your community and you don't use it, you don't care about it. You're not impressed. And so for a lot of infrastructure projects, they don't happen right away. They don't necessarily happen in your community. If they do happen in your community, you don't necessarily benefit directly from it. So people like it in the abstract. You know, it's polling relatively well right now. It's not like it's an unpopular thing. But I think Democrats are overestimating how much people are going to love it when it happens. Whereas long-term care, I think that would touch a lot more people quickly and significantly, because that is a real burden for a lot of people.
At least is like peace of mind, you know, like, and that's why I think it buys people off. It's not infrastructure, but it seems like a nice thing. And heck, if we're going to spend all this money anyway and taxes are going to go up and we're going to risk inflation, at least, man, this is going to give me a little protection. Like, God forbid, you know, if I need to provide long-term care, I can get that.
This also presumes that it provides enough help that it actually provides that relief. You know, you had a situation with Obamacare where the subsidies were not super duper awesome for everybody. And some people felt like this isn't no great shakes. This isn't a great deal for me. You know, so if you get a little bit of help with long-term care, but you still have a pretty significant burden, you might think it's a bait and switch deal. So it's not like governing is hard. Getting people to a point of satisfaction is hard. And there isn't unlimited resources to help everybody. So that's why Democrats, there's an expectation game that Democrats are they're leaning towards raising expectations very high. That and that's a reason why Democrats are reluctant to engage in the negotiation, because they've set the bar very high for what counts as success. And so if you go down from $2 trillion to $600 billion, there are partisans that are going to be unimpressed, and maybe that means less people get stuff and are less impressed. Theory.
And that's the Ezra Klein argument about Obama's mistake.
Right.
But it's part of the argument. It's bigger than that. But Bill, when do you think? I mean, Biden is really just living this charmed presidency so far. I mean, just compared to Donald Trump, again, in comparison to Trump, he can do no wrong. I mean, this is a guy who literally commented about the trial of the decade before the decision was rendered. And that's just Joe being Joe, and they were sequestered, so what harm could it do? I mean, this kind of thing, if Trump had done, he would have done it.
He would have done it the opposite direction.
Well, he would have been defending Chauvin. We know that. He would have done it in a more boisterous way, and he would have been rightly criticized for it. Nobody's even talking about Joe Biden doing this today, right?
Because on the scale of transgressions, it's very low on the list.
Well, but that's because we have defined deviancy down, or the low self bigotry of low expectations, whatever. My point is, we're grading Biden on a curve. When do things turn? I feel like he's just riding high, and it hasn't caught up to him.
The economy was not awesome in 2012, but it was better than 2008. So Obama could say, "Hey, things aren't perfect, but at least I'm not that guy," and that was enough.
But I guess my question is is Biden going to have years of just sort of, the wind at his back, or are things going to? Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that could go wrong, including the Afghanistan withdrawal, which could go wrong a lot of ways. And he could be blamed for it, but it might take like a year or two before that would ever manifest. Not that I'm rooting for it.
Right. But if you pull out Afghanistan and then 6 months later a Taliban-adjacent group has a terrorist attack in the United States, that could be a significant political problem for Joe Biden. I think something has.
Although even there, he can point out the fact that Donald Trump was the one who actually.
Yeah, but you made a decision. You have to own the decisions that you made and any repercussions from them. So I think blame shifting there would be the worst thing you could do. He'd have to own it and try to deal with it. Look, Barack Obama pulled out of Iraq, and then ISIS came in, and then Obama went after ISIS. It's not like he tried to point the finger at somebody else. He tried. I mean, he didn't say, "Boy, I screwed up on that one," but he did at least try to then deal with the issue. And Biden would have to do the same.
You would think that Biden would have learned that lesson. It's not like we have to go back 100 years for an analogous situation. Like, it just happened. We finally got rid of ISIS like 2 years ago or something. Started rolling back the caliphate.
Well, look, Ronald Reagan pulled out of Lebanon, and then you had the big bomb.
You got to go there.
And then the bombing happened in Lebanon, which was not quite 9/11, but a pretty big deal. And Democrats thought they could make hay out of it, but at the end of the day, they couldn't, because Reagan was still seen as a major improvement over Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter made you feel bad. Reagan makes you feel good. And by 1984, the recession of 82 had cycled out. And this one military screw up in Lebanon was considered, a relatively, it was one negative check mark on the ledger, but not enough to overwhelm all the other improvements that people felt about America and their lives. So it's hard to say if even in that circumstance, even if we have a terrorist attack that's connected to Afghanistan, if that would be enough to say, hey, Biden isn't somehow as bad than Donald Trump, or that was a mistake that we elected Joe Biden, let's go in a different direction now.
I'm feeling this frustration because I feel like Biden's making a mistake in Afghanistan. I feel like the spending is not good. It's too much. And there will be someday we're going to have to pay for this. I don't know when. I don't know when it's going to come back. But what makes it frustrating is a couple things. One, that Donald Trump was so bad that any criticism of Biden is met with, how could you say that about Biden after look at all the stuff Trump did? And then secondly, it's going to be like a delayed. I mean, if this spending comes back to haunt us, if gravity reasserts itself, if reality is real and you can't just spend money, trillions of dollars without any ramification, at some point there's going to be the bill's going to come due, but it could be years from now, and so there's, in a sense, I feel like there's like no accountability. I feel like Biden is doing a lot of things I disagree with, but he's just constantly being rewarded for running up the score. There's no, I don't know when we can ever see the results. And again, I'm not even rooting for it. Like I don't want a recession. I don't want an economic collapse. I don't want any of that stuff or a terrorist attack, God forbid. So I'm in this weird spot, Bill.
Well, you have a column about this, saying that Biden is trying to emulate LBJ, but that LBJ should not be a model he should be trying to replicate. Yeah,
this is over at the Daily Beast. And yeah, I mean, look, Lyndon Johnson, I think there's a sense that LBJ, because he passed this amazing domestic legislative agenda, is held up as a hero. And look, it's impressive what he did legislatively. He's the master of the Senate. But let's not forget, Johnson was a very unpopular president who couldn't even run for re-election. So if that's kind of, you're holding him up as the model or one of the models, I'm not sure that's the best example.
I mean, Biden, I think any president wants to be historically significant, wants a big legacy. Some people might act all nonchalant, legacies, that's for the historians to worry about. But you don't want to be a caretaker president. You want to do something big. And I'm sure Biden is no different on that score. And LBJ is a complicated figure because he has some very big legacies that are, I think, incredibly important to American progress. And he has aspects that are terrible, like Vietnam. And even the stuff that he did that I would say was good, Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, Voting Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, none of them are perfect. We didn't solve racism through the Voting Rights Act. We didn't end all housing discrimination through the Fair Housing Act. We didn't solve every healthcare problem through Medicare, Medicaid. We didn't solve poverty totally through various welfare programs. I would argue, and I think, and your column acknowledged this, that when you calculate the government benefits that people get, the rate of poverty is lower than it was before the Great Society. You can if you calculate without those benefits, then it's not. And so some conservatives might say, well, you're dependent on these things, and that's nothing to celebrate. But I think to the average person, having more money for whatever reason is better than not having it. Being able to feed yourself better than you could otherwise is better. So I think LBJ is an example of someone who spent the political capital. You didn't win re-election. He bruised a lot of egos along the way, and expectations were not properly aligned. So things got passed. You passed the Civil Rights Act, and the Watts riots happened a year later, and white people say, "What did this get us?" So you have those kinds of issues that made it hard for LBJ to pass the baton and prevent, essentially a conservative backlash that lasted for several decades.
Yeah, and that's part of my point. I mean, even if you believe that all of Johnson's policies were a net plus, it led to, as you were saying, several decades of, you get Nixon and Reagan, and again, Vietnam, you can't divorce the Vietnam part from the legacy and from the political backlash, but it was more than just that. It was things like law and order and a sense that there was, welfare had created a cycle of dependency, and that there were actually unintended consequences that made things worse in some cases and trapped people. And I feel like that lasted, again, as you said, for decades. Like, so if LBJ is your model, think twice about
I think you should learn the lessons, and I feel like a lot of Democrats have not learned that lesson. They've learned the Obama lesson, as they explain it, which is, as you related to Ezra Klein before, do more things, do bigger, better things, because when you do it halfway, people are dissatisfied. But that ignores the LBJ lesson, which is, you can do big things and still have people be dissatisfied. It's not a guarantee that there isn't backlash. You have to set expectations as best you can. And it's not even that is somehow a guarantee. It just may be that whatever you do is not going to have the immediate political payoff. Not everybody can be FDR. Not everybody can come out of a colossal depression where wherever the imperfection is, you still get credit. Now, maybe Biden's in that place. Maybe we're in a place where things were so bad before that he gets a lot more slack. And the imperfections can be managed better politically. But he doesn't have the congressional majorities that FDR had, although those can be oversimplified because there's plenty of ideological division in the Democratic Party back then. But it's going to be hard for him to get stuff passed. And when he gets passed, we can't know is going to work as magically as some Democrats assume it will. So you got to find a way to set expectations, probably, so people aren't as upset as they may be that their lives haven't been, doubled in improvement right away.
Yeah, no, I think so. We could argue about the Great Society and the policies on the merits of them, whether they're good or bad, but just in terms of learning the political lessons, I mean, I think there are probably two big ones there that we've sort of touched on. One is the expectations. I mean, he declared war on poverty and said we're going to eradicate it. And last time I checked, people are still poor and people are still racist. So, like, on those merits, by the definition that he set of success, he didn't succeed. And clearly, politically, he couldn't even run for re-election, so he didn't succeed. And then the Vietnam thing, I mean, to me, the lesson there would be, well, there's a lot of lessons from Vietnam, but specifically as it relates to Biden right now, I would say it's that, we don't control our own agenda. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening out there right now. Like, last time, I think Russia has just pulled back from the Ukraine border, but they were massing like a lot of troops there, and you never know what's going to overtake your agenda. Even if you have a robust domestic agenda, things intervene, and if you mess something up in one area, it could overshadow your legacy and your accomplishments.
I think Biden knows that, and Biden's interesting because he's not an isolationist. He's not an American firster. He's not someone who believes that American troops shouldn't go anywhere and we should never intervene. Clearly, you look at his record over the past 40 years, it is decidedly not that. But it's also not as simple as he's just a hawk and wants to go in everywhere whenever it is. He has a bit of a complicated, nuanced, hard to pin down philosophy, but certainly foreign policy is an issue that he is engaged in. And so I grant that he's taking a risk in pulling troops out of Afghanistan in the event that some terrorist cell starts to set up shop there and does damage to America. But he's not going to disengage from the world. Yeah. And I assume his hope is that he can still have a robust counterterrorism operation that's not going to take their eye off the ball without having American boots on the ground in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I will say that generally, I'm not a Biden basher. And there's a lot about Biden that I like personally, but he has weird ideas on foreign policy historically. And I think the idea of tying this withdrawal to 9/11, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, is really a bad idea for a variety of reasons. You know, I mean, the day, you know, if you read, The Looming Tower, the 9/11 date was symbolic to begin with, you know? It was chosen symbolically. I think it's going to be perceived by radical Islamists as, we're surrendering and we are surrendering on this significant date. I don't know why you would hand a propaganda tool to them. It just seems like a bad idea, and I'm guessing Biden came up with it,
or someone came up with it and put it on his desk and he signed off on it. Look, if there was a terrorist attack on 9/11, Biden wants to be as symbolic of us leaving, and the terrorists want to be symbolic for them showing that they have dominance in the region, that would be disastrous for Biden. I mean, there's no getting around that. So there's an element of risk there. But again, I suspect Biden is going to tell his team, you are going to watch everything like a hawk, and we're going to be incredibly aggressive at surveillance and at counterterrorism operations in and around that date, so we don't have that problem. And any president has to balance that kind of risk. You know, there are no clean choices. There are no choices where no one dies here and only people die there. You know, you're always managing risk, and I think he made the decision for whatever reason that this was the least risky of the available choices that he had. Hello?
I texted you saying that I wanted that virtual reality headset, and you didn't text back.
Because I'm busy.
Who cares if you're busy? There's only one left in stock.
Okay. I'm not going to jump and run out and buy this thing even though there's one left in stock.
You don't jump, you just order it.
But I'm not going to just order it.
Can I order it?
No.
Why not?
Can I finish this, please?
Fine.
Bill, I think the audience would like you to get that VR headset.
What's that, Matt?
I think the audience would like you to get that VR headset.
Anyway, can I shift gears to one more topic?
Yeah. Then we should wrap it up.
Well, let me ask you this: we talk about Biden a lot. Do you want?
Which is weird, right? Which is weird because for a long time, even when Biden was president, everyone was still talking about Trump, and that's not the case as much.
Do you want to talk about carbon tax, or do you want to talk about the New York City mayor's race?
I think New York City mayor would win out there, Bill.
Okay. So we're in late April. We are 2 months away from the Democratic primary, which most people assume is essentially the ball game. Because there's not a Bloomberg-like figure in the Republican primary. And I think, we should look at this race provincially. New York City has more people than 47 states. This is a pretty major. This is almost like having a governor's race, and it's a huge element of the American economy. So, if you pick a total rank amateur in that position, I think that's bad for the country. And I think Andrew Yang is that rank amateur. So I'm definitely in anybody but Yang.
You hate place. Andrew Yang.
I think he's a nice person. But I don't think New York City mayor is an entry level position, and it doesn't make sense for him to be in that job. I mean, this is a position that has its own counterterrorism unit. The NYPD has its own counterterrorism unit. This is a position that has direct authority over 1,866 schools and 1 million students. That is not something that you give an amateur the responsibility to run.
Bill, this is you once again with your elite establishment fetish for expertise. What about just a regular business guy who can roll up his sleeves and just use common sense business stuff to get things done?
Look, I voted in the 2001 New York City election, and I remember being disgusted that the argument that carried the day was, we just came out of a horrific traumatic terrorist attack. We need a businessman. Like, that made no sense. There was no connection between those 2 points. But Bloomberg literally outspent Mark Green 70-1, and you couldn't even find a Mark Green advertisement. And Rudy Giuliani had his 9/11 halo that he bestowed upon Bloomberg, and everyone bought it. It was nuts. Now look,
Bloomberg turned out to be an okay mayor, right? I mean,
Bloomberg was better than Giuliani. I still would have rather had Mark Green in the position, quite frankly. But Bloomberg wasn't a complete and utter disaster. I mean, there's obviously plenty of things to criticize, and it's not like because he was a billionaire, therefore we pulled out 9/11. We pulled out 9/11 because we didn't have terrorist attacks afterwards.
So my sense is, Bill, I've never lived in New York City, but my sense is that Giuliani cleaned up the city before he went insane. And that since Rudy left, it's sort of slowly gone downhill, and it's not. De Blasio has been kind of a disaster.
I mean, I think that's a common take. I don't think it's fair. Crime was going down on Dinkins' watch before Giuliani. I haven't checked the numbers lately, so if someone wants to go, ream me in the thread, go ahead. But my recollection is that the crime rate in New York City was not in any really different than the national crime rate. We've been in a nationwide decline in crime. It's not like every part of the country was following Giuliani's broken windows philosophy in doing so. I mean, there's all sorts of debates why crime has gone down over the past couple decades. And I don't believe crime in New York City today is wildly different than what's happening in the country nationwide either. I gotta say, again, never lived there, but have traveled there frequently. Just anecdotally, it just felt like it was getting a little more and more dangerous. Well, Giuliani did things like crack down on squeegee guys. I remember, my parents worked in the city. I lived in the suburbs. I remember driving to New York with my parents to their work if I had to go in for whatever reason. And you'd get a squeegee guy, coming off the Major Deegan, going into Harlem. I experienced that on a regular basis. And that kind of thing you didn't experience as much after Giuliani. So that made things feel different. Doesn't mean that actually was the reason why crime went down in the city. I think there are those types of superficial things.
So you not to belabor the point, but it sounds like you do not buy into is it James Q. Wilson? Is that the guy who originated the broken windows theory?
I don't remember. It could
anyway,
be.
It sounds like you don't buy into the Bernie Kerik, Rudy Giuliani school of thought.
No, and I think we all know now that Bernie Kerik and Rudy Giuliani are not our grand thinkers in society that we turn to for wisdom.
I think Rudy has gone insane. I don't think Rudy. I don't. You tell me. Do you think Rudy was always this crazy?
Go Google Rudy Giuliani ferret video, and you tell me if Giuliani is somehow more insane today, or was he always insane?
I don't want to Google
always
ferret.
insane.
I don't want to Google any ferret videos. Let me just say that, because I've heard some of these urban legends, and I don't want to. This
is not a Richard Gere urban legend, but there's a famous video. Giuliani had a regular radio call-in show. And there was a guy in New York that was a big ferrets rights guy. You should really keep ferrets as pets. And Giuliani wasn't letting people have ferrets as pets. And Giuliani just reacts to this guy. And you might say ferret pet guy's a weird dude. Feel free to have a negative opinion about ferret guy. But you're the mayor of the city. You don't have to berate a constituent for wanting to own a ferret on citywide radio and say that the guy needs mental help. That's not a thing that a mayor should do. But Giuliani sounds unhinged. The ferret guy sounds more reasonable than Giuliani.
Well, I do remember there's a video of Giuliani dressed in drag with Donald Trump from maybe the early 90s, late 80s.
That's when he was mayor.
I guess it would have been the 90s then, but still, it's weird.
I mean, Giuliani always had, he was a showboat. and want to be center of attention. And I mean, I give the guy some credit for willing to, make fun of himself.
What does Sohrab Ahmari think of this?
Who?
Is David French to blame?
I don't know.
Is David French to blame for Rudy's cross-dressing?
That I cannot say. But I don't think, I mean, plenty of Democrats aren't through with de Blasio. So here's the interesting thing about the race right now. So I think there's a ranked choice voting race. It's got 40 candidates in the primary, about 8 of whom are considered relatively serious, but almost all have low name ID, save for Yang. And so Yang is winning these polls with about 22% of the first choice vote, largely based on name ID. It's not an overwhelming lead, but to overtake him, someone's got to break out of the pack and boost that name ID and be considered the main Yang alternative, or at least one of the Yang alternatives. And the two who are the closest to him, who have relatively better name ID than the rest, are Eric Adams, who's the Brooklyn Borough president, and Scott Stringer, who's the city comptroller. And Adams is considered more of a moderate candidate, and Stringer more of a liberal candidate. Adams is African-American, Stringer is white, and Stringer was the Manhattan Borough president, and he won his comptroller race against Elliot Spitzer with, I think, more of like a white liberal base, if I remember correctly. And, Adams is a former police officer. He once said that he would carry a gun into a house of worship as a response to the Pittsburgh Synagogue massacre. And has generally been walking a moderate, he's against defund the police. I'm not sure what Stringer has said about those sorts of things. So there's a chance that Adams could put together an African-American moderate coalition. And being Brooklyn Borough president, Brooklyn's a pretty populated borough, more populated than Manhattan is. So I think Adams has those things going for him, but Yang is sort of weird ideologically. He has long been seen as kind of a left guy because of his UBI support, but he has taken positions that are less liberal in this race. He's kind of poo-pooed tax increases on the rich. He's taken shots at the teachers union. He's been kind of pro-development, which a lot of the anti-gentrification folks on the left in New York don't like. He still has some endorsements from lefty people, but there are other New York State progressives that are trying to organize against Yang, and some are consolidating around Stringer. Stringer got the Working Families Party endorsement, which is kind of a big deal in New York, but others, like some of the women candidates or people of color candidates, and it's ranked choice. And some of these endorsements are like, hey, we endorse these 2 people or these 3 people. And it makes it hard to consolidate around one person. I mean, in one sense, who cares? It's ranked choice. Vote for 3 different people. Vote for 5 different people. You can go up to 5. But if it's so messy and so crowded, you don't even know who these people are, which is the case right now. People don't even know who the people are. The name IDs are largely below 50%.
Some of this is going to repeat itself in the California governor's recall or whatever they're doing, right?
Well, at least in California is such a big money state. If you don't have a war chest, you're doomed. You might get 100 people running for recalls, but if you don't have any money, you're not going to know they are. No one is dominating the money race in New York City right now, and people haven't even spent their money on ads yet. So maybe some have more than others. Maybe Adams and Stringer can start an ad campaign and break out and be able to be a Yang alternative. Bill de Blasio, 8 years ago, was not the front runner at this point in time, but he had a fantastic ad campaign that kicked in just the right time. So that might happen still. So I don't think Yang is a lock by any stretch, but you have a lot of complicating factors in that you have, I think, some moderates not through with Yang on the experience level, some progressives not through with Yang on the ideological level, but Yang getting some moderate support for his positions and some progressive support for other positions, and he's a generally nice guy, genial guy, upbeat, can attract media well. He's hard to hit. It's like attacking Bambi. And the ranked choice thing complicates things. If Yang is well-liked enough that he's getting first place and second place votes, that would be enough. the other candidates need to find a way to tell their folks, don't give Yang your second place vote. Don't give Yang your third place vote. We got to suffocate him so he's only got that 25% of first place vote, and that won't be enough for him.
All right. We'll leave it at that. I will say, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first week in a year when we have not done a DMZ. Is that right?
When we started the pandemic, I can't remember if we took a week off at some point or not, but
it's possible we took a week off, but like I know there have been times where I was out, but you did it without me.
Yeah.
There's a time when you were out and I did it without you. I think this may be the first time in a year when we have not done a Zoom chat with our Patreon supporters.
We will do it next week, though.
Yeah.
We're not abandoning the DM Zooms, just schedules didn't fit this week. One thing I need to plug, though, Matt. So my podcast interview with the great history podcaster Bruce Carlson, My History Can Beat Up Your Politics, that is live now.
Oh, cool.
And that was a real fun chat, and he did a real nice job editing it. So do check that out. If you haven't listened to my podcast, When America Worked, it's about Edward Titinius, my opinion, the reason why we have the United Nations. So I talked about with Bruce. There's more in my podcast. Listen to them both. Great way to spend the weekend. And I did have a piece at the Monthly this week on court packing and the history of FDR court packing, which we've talked about on the show before, but I do get into some nuances I don't think are well known. So I do read that, and I should have a carbon tax piece in the Monthly coming out by Monday.
So check out my piece on LBJ at the Daily Beast, and then this weekend at the Beast I should have a piece about, I don't know, did you see last week that guy Lynn Wood, the MAGA pro-Trump attorney guy down in Georgia? He was speaking at Rhema Bible College in outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he was delivering this kind of, in fact, he did the Q symbol or something. Remember that?
I saw that video. I saw the Q video.
And his cadence and his delivery was very much like a televangelist. Very much. And so I wrote a piece about that. So stay tuned for that. This is where I get to kind of use some of my experience as a evangelical conservative and maybe share it with a little broader audience. So check that out. I talked to Mike Murphy this week. I talked to Sean McMeekin, who is an author, has a book called Stalin's War about Joseph Stalin. So lots of stuff going on. And, of course, fully vaccinated now.
How do you feel? I think on this show we've crossed 24 hours since your shot, your second shot.
Just did. My arm is super sore.
But no fevers, no chills?
No fever. I feel tired, but that could just be general laziness. As you know, Bill, I have to go in a matter of a couple of hours. I have to manage a Little League game. So I'm going to be, if you've seen Earl Weaver in action, you can just Google that too, Bill. Not safe for work. But if you Google Earl Weaver arguing with umpires, you'll get a sense for what I'm about to unleash. So check that out.
Well, good luck in the game, and we'll talk next week.
You got it. See you in the DMZ.